Hello, hello.
Hello.
Shalom Aleichem, Rabbi.
Aleichem shalom. How are we all doing today?
Baruch Hashem.
All right. So buckle up because this is perhaps the longest chapter I've taught yet. We have a long journey ahead of us, but let's give the following introduction before we get started. We are chapter 22 in Hilchos Ishos. Okay? We're going to spend a long time discussing things which are pretty similar ideas based on the following concepts. Number one, the wife brings things into her marriage. The husband has certain abilities to make use of them, and even ability to inherit if she passes away. We're going to first deal with what is considered an inheritance and when does it begin, the ability for the husband. Is it from an engagement? Is it from a marriage, etc.? Then we're going to spend a lot of time talking about the various types of properties, is the word I'm looking for, brought into a marriage. There's something called nichse melug, and that's something called nichse tzom barzel. Nichse means, the chassid means property. Melug is an interesting word. Some say it's a different language, not Hebrew or Aramaic, and it means the dowry. Some say melug is from the word meliga, which means cutting the fruit. And here's the difference between the two of them. Nichse melug is a property that the wife owns and brings into the marriage and allows the husband to do business with them. And at the end of the time, if she passes away, if they get divorced, etc., he returns the item to her as is, and they walk away. In other words, if the value appreciated or depreciated, it's of little relevance. And the sages created this concept in order that he should do business with her property in order to have the household have profit, have money to survive. Nichse tzom barzel, the second kind, barzel is iron, which means solid, which means that the husband, in a certain sense, takes over them. It's not that he only can take the benefit of the property of them and it goes back to the woman, but it actually can become his. And we're going to see those differences as we go through the book, through the chapter rather, not through the book here, through the chapter. And one retains the ownership by the lady, the nichse melug, and he can have the benefit of it. The nichse tzom barzel becomes the ownership of the husband. And therefore, it becomes a different conversation. And the second long part of the chapter is going to go through a number of different variations on the theme of these various types of properties. Now, classic question, how do we know which is which? So the Rambam's of the opinion that the lady decides it's her property. She's bringing it from her father's house, either as a dowry or a property she owned or inherited before or a gift from her parents or whatever. So she makes a decision. Is it going to be category A or category B? There is another opinion that says the husband, when he gets married, has the opportunity to make that decision. With that introduction, again, that the wife's property will be inherited by the husband, the sage has set up, so he should care for her. And B, that the two types of property, nichse melug, nichse tzom barzel, as we'll see the differences as how they play out throughout the marriage. And again, it's a long chapter, so we'll get started, but that's the introduction, which will hopefully be helpful as we go further. Perek Chav Beis Aleph, the first halacha. Habal kodem l'chol adam b'yirishas isha. The husband takes precedence over inheriting the wife from anybody else. When does he become? When does he have this right to her inheritance? When she leaves her father's possession, in other words, when she leaves her father's home, and even if she did not actually get into the chuppah yet, but her father sent her, left her, and we'll see some details on this momentarily. Since she has now become in the sense her husband's home, he therefore has the right to inherit her. Base Ketzad, what do we mean? Ha'isha shenisarsa master avila ba'ala, the lady who's become engaged in the sense that the halachic engagement was, and her husband and her father gave her over to the husband, or to the husband's messengers. The husband lived in a different city, the husband to be here, and he said, okay, go with the messengers. They'll escort you to your future husband. Or the father sent escorts of his own, and now they gave her over and said, now you're ready to leave us and go to the husband. But then she died during the journey. Before she enters into the chuppah, before she concludes the kiddushin, she only had the erusin, the betrothal, but not the actual marriage ceremony yet. In any of these cases, her husband will inherit her, even if the ksuva document was left by her father, because these are situations where she's left the messengers of her father. She's gone to the messengers of her husband. She's gone to the husband. She already, in a sense, belongs to the husband's household. She's considered enough there that he will inherit her. And so too, she went with her father or with her father's messengers as escorts, and they went along the way. And then they met the husband, and they're all traveling together. They come to a hotel, and they spent the night together as a married couple. And she dies, her husband can already inherit her. But if the father, if they're together with the father still, or there is escorts both from the father and from the husband, or even if the husband was there, and they end up spending the night together in a hotel, similar to what we said before. But here they did it differently, not like a married couple. But the Rambam says like regular travelers, so that he was in one room, she was in another room. Since she is together with her father, or together with her father's escorts, her father's messengers, she never spent that time with her husband for marriage. If she passes away, then her father will inherit her. Even though her husband may already have access to the ksuva at this point. So in other words, the real difference here is she still within her father's purview jurisdiction, if you wish, or is she now already in as a married lady in her husband's purview jurisdiction, home and entity? And that would be the difference.
A question.
Yes.
So she's on her way to marry, or she's been with her father's escorts to the husband. And we found out that what Rambam is saying is that if she passes away, the potential husband has rights to her dowry or whatever.
Correct.
But what if he passes away and she's on the way? Does she have the right to his inheritance?
That's a good question. And the Rambam doesn't discuss that here. The Rambam only discusses in halacha more so the discussion of the wife receiving the inheritance of the husband, rather, receiving the inheritance of the wife. In halacha, the children will receive the inheritance of the father. And there are things put into place, some of which we've already discussed in earlier chapters, some of which will be discussed later on, about how that should be put into place in order to make sure that the boys, the girls, the wife all have what they need to live. But technically, halachically, from the Torah's kind of initial write-up, the inheritance of the father goes to the kids, not to the wife. And therefore, it's not a similar discussion that we're having here.
Rabbi,
Yes.
Based on what you described, legally, they don't have any, not ketubah, nothing. So why the father have rights if they practically, it's a compromise, but it's not like a real marriage even. Why he has the right of I don't understand where is the base on this?
Okay, so I think the simple answer to the question is again, The Chachamim set up, the rabbis, the sages set up that they want the husband to take care, and he has certain responsibilities which he has to take care of the wife. So it kind of flip of those responsibilities. We give him some benefits. So he has to take care of her. He has to feed her, clothe her, and bury her if God forbid she dies. So rather in kind of to help out that situation, we give him the benefits, and one of those was that he has the ability to inherit her property if she dies. That will make him want to help, so to say, make sure her property survives and make profit, and he takes good care of her. And that's why he's marrying her, to be able to take care of her, and knows that he has a responsibility to take care of her, and at the same time, to make it kind of a fair situation, we let him some benefits. So therefore, we give him the inheritance. Normally, we're not dealing with the situation. Normally, they get married and they live together for a number of years, happily ever after. And then whatever happens at the end of time, it's less of a conversation. They've been married. Here, the Rambam's getting into the detailed law of what happened, or when this transaction of responsibility and therefore inheritance begins in a situation where they were only betrothed and they were not married. Who was she with, etc., etc. But it's not your average case.
Thank you.
Okay, let's keep going. Gimel. So you say, what if she's a begeret, which we already learned in the first chapter, is a certain age, or she was an orphan or a widow, and she left her father's house to go to her husband's house. She's an older lady. She's a widower. She's a widow, or she was an orphan. She doesn't have her father's home. So she has her own decision here. And she made a decision to leave her home to go to her husband. And there is neither a husband meeting her nor a husband's escorts. And then she died on the journey. In a Bal Yerusha, then her husband does not inherit her because there was no beginning of that relationship. Dalit. Yes.
Rabbi, this is at a time when they didn't go under the chuppah? I mean, there was no...
They have not gone under the chuppah yet.
Okay.
Now, you have to remember, the Rambam spoke about this earlier. The concept of erusin, a betrothal, was not an engagement like we have today, which really has very little responsibility. An engagement in those days, which we're calling the erusin, was the ring ceremony, which is the first part of today's chuppah. And then we have the second part of today's chuppah. In the older days, the ring ceremony could have happened a year earlier. And then after they prepared for the wedding, they came together a year later under the chuppah. So this is in between those two states. So there's some halachic already connection, but there is not enough to say that they're living together as a married couple.
Okay, so when the husband gives his wife the ring under the chuppah today, then she's still under her father's jurisdiction?
In a certain sense, probably not, because she's already under the chuppah. But if he gave the ring at an engagement party in front of two witnesses and said the formula, like they used to do in the olden times, then it would become the dilemma we're talking about today of exactly whose house did she still live with? Has she gone over? Has she started the process of going over? What is the beginning of that process, etc.
Okay, so the
and by the way, just a footnote. One of the reasons we do it together under the chuppah is because the Chachamim were concerned, even already back in Babylonia, about all these issues. And there were too many times where a pogrom would happen or whatever, something would go on and they would not see each other ever again. And we don't know, did he die? Did she not die? She need to get a divorce? Does she not need a divorce? Because they began that connection, but they didn't complete the connection. And therefore we said, you know what, let's put them together so there will never be that doubt of an in-between period.
Yes, thank you.
And by the way, that's why we read the ketubah under the chuppah today to separate the two. And that's why we have a separate borei pri hagafin said on the first cup of wine and on the second cup of wine, because they're two separate ceremonies. So the ketubah is, you don't really need to read a ketubah in public. We do it to create a barrier between the two, a separation between them. Okay?
Thank you.
My pleasure. I'd love to spend all day on this, but let's try to keep going. But please feel free to, again, ask questions along the way. Dalit. Hanosi isha she asura lo. If a person marries a lady who's forbidden to marry, one of the women we learned earlier that a husband and wife are not allowed to marry. If it is the type that they are allowed to have kiddushin, if you remember, we learned some kiddushin don't even take hold, they're not valid, and some they are valid, but they're not allowed to be together. So if they have kiddushin, in Meser Tachtav Yerushalayim, so then he will inherit her because technically they were married. The same thing we learned about a child. If someone marries a child, that technically up until she comes to a certain age, she could contest the marriage. So the marriage is not really concretely sealed until that stage passes. So nonetheless, she's not really married until that time when she's old enough to make the statement comes. He still will inherit her because he's still taking care of her. And this was kind of in lieu of your responsibility to feed her. We let you have the benefit that if she passes away, you will inherit her. But if a mentally capable person, a regular person, marries a chareshes who's a deaf mute, where we have the discussion earlier if they're allowed to get married. Is he basically Yerushalayim? If she dies, he doesn't have to. If she dies, he does not inherit her money. On the other hand, the flip side of cheresh nasa pikechas umesa Yerushalayim. On the flip side, if she is mentally capable, and he is not, and she marries him, so then he will inherit her. She did this marriage on her own capable understanding, so therefore we consider her like any lady who gets married, who by definition of marriage understands she's giving over the benefit of inheritance to her husband. But when she's not capable of making that decision, then we don't automatically assume that decision for her. Hey, Kitana Shiniskachila Dastavia Vanisa Shaloila Dastavia. If a Kitana the Kiddushin was done with her father's agreement, but the marriage was without the father. So he did a ring ceremony and the father said Mazel Tov. And then a half a year later, he takes her to the chuppah and the father says, I'm not ready for this to happen yet. The father can contest. Like the Rambam says, we've already explained in the earlier chapters dealing with the laws of a katana, of a minor, when she can get married. And even if the father doesn't contest publicly, but we know it's against his will, that the husband will not inherit her property unless the father wants. In other words, if the father is not ready to give up taking care of her, the husband doesn't assume the responsibility to take care of her and does not assume the benefit of inheritance. Vav. Horu HaGaonim, the Gaonim, those were the great rabbis and great sages after the time of the Talmud, taught the following rule. If a lady took ill and she says to her husband, please, I want you to divorce me. And she says, I'll give up my ksuva. If you divorce me, normally you have to pay a certain amount of money. I forgo that money, just divorce me. Why? Because she doesn't want him to inherit her. In Shemila, we don't listen to her. If they went through a whole life, he took care of her, he fed her, and now he's taking care of her through sickness, we don't just say that she can just now walk out of the agreement. And now if she continues and says, well, really, I hate him and I don't want to be with him, we don't listen to her. If she had said that earlier in a normal circumstance that I don't want to be with him, we deal with the situation and perhaps there's a divorce and a ksuva and all the rest comes into play. But here it's pretty obvious that she's saying it only because she wants to kind of renege on her end of this agreement, then we don't listen. The Ein Dana L'Dimeredes V'Din Yafa, who's in the Rambam, agrees with this law and says we don't rule her as someone who rebelled against her husband because we understand that she's doing it just because of the money in the situation, and the Rambam agrees with this halacha. Clearly, it's one that has to be dealt with by the rabbis on location to kind of really see what's at play here. Zion 7. Here we start talking about the different types of property brought into the wedding. Kol nechasim sheyesh l'isha, all property which belongs to the lady. whether it is property that we call Som Barzel or the property we call Muluk. Again, one is where it goes over to the husband's kind of property, and one is where it remains the wife's property, but the husband can benefit from the value. Again, at the end of it, one of them, he has to pay attention and to the ups and downs, appreciation, and the other one he doesn't. Okay, so the Nichse Term Barzel is the one where it goes over to the husband, and the Nichse Malug is the one where it remains the wife's and he has the benefit. Any type of property while she's alive, the husband can benefit from the fruit of this produce. And so let's say it's a tree, and then he has produce. And if she passes away during her husband's alive, and she dies, her husband inherits it all. Therefore, if the lady goes ahead and sells nichse muluk still retains ownership of. Even though she owned this property since she was a child, it's always been hers. And she says it's nichse muluk. I want it to be this kind of property where I'm going to still retain ownership, but you can have benefit. And then she says one day I want to sell it, and she sells it. While she's alive, the husband can take the benefit, the produce, away from the people who bought the field because it was his, but not the actual property, because the property remains hers and she has a right to sell it. But she doesn't have a right to sell the produce during the time she's alive. That belongs to the husband. And he has no right to take the property until she dies. So while she sold it when she's alive, the sale goes on. But the owner, the purchaser, does not receive the property until after she dies, and does not receive the produce even while she's alive, because the husband takes that. But then she goes ahead and she passes away during his lifetime. He can then go take the actual property out of the hands of the purchaser, and he doesn't have to pay them. The Rambam continues, if she sells it and gets $100 and puts $100 away in a safe, so to say, and the $100 is still sitting there, he has to return the $100 to the purchaser. And he can't argue and say, well, really, it's my wife's money and I inherited, because we know this money was given to her directly because of his purchase, and therefore he has a right to take it, but he has to return the money for it as well. Ches. When does this apply? When does this halacha take place? How you doing, Lapal? When there's certain fields that everybody knows belongs to the husband. So if it's your front yard of your house has an apple tree, and everybody knows you live in this house, so the apple tree is clearly known by the husband when he marries the wife. I believe but if she owned property in another country, and the husband never knew that she even owned such a property, and then when she sells it, then she can sell it. In other words, the husband comes into the marriage with the knowledge of saying, whatever you own now, I will be able to benefit from. But this he never knew about because it's a different country. So then her sale is good because it was always hers. She retained the right to the property, and therefore she could sell it. And same thing, someone who's betrothed and sells the property during her betrothal, during this halachic engagement, michar kayim, her sale is good. Because as we learned, until the chuppah, until they get married, he doesn't have access to her property. So it's not his, it's all hers, and she can sell it. Test. If a lady signs over all of her property to another person, whether this person is a relative, is not a relative, regardless. Before she gets married, even though that if she gets divorced or she becomes a widow, the property that's present that she wrote to someone else would become batal. Batal means it would be done away with, it would be undone, it would become nullified. As the Rambam says, we'll teach you later on in the laws of when you're allowed to gift and not gift in Hilchas Matana, the laws of a gift. Nonetheless, in this case, the husband cannot eat the produce. And if she dies in his life, he does not inherit this property. Since she gave it as a gift before she got married. And when she dies during the life of her husband, so then the person who receives the gift then receives it as a complete gift instantly. She wrote it over to him. She gave it before she got married, so it instantly will become hers. It's become his or hers, whoever she gave the gift to when she dies. Not just that, but even more so. Even if she gave over a portion of her property or all of her property before she gets married, because and she writes in the deed, in the contract, you're going to receive it from today. You can acquire the property today. And whenever depending on what I want, whatever I want, and since the receiver of the gift, the recipient is not receiving an actual kinyan until the lady wants it to be. In other words, she's selling it, saying it's yours, but I will actually give it over to you and you'll acquire it at some point. I'm not sure yet, today, a month, a year, or 2 years. So at that point, the husband is not allowed to eat the gift of that, the produce of that gift. And if she dies, he does not inherit it because she already gifted it in a way that he received it, that the recipient accepts it mehayoim from today, even though he technically doesn't get it until she wants it later on. But nevertheless, as we learned in the laws of conditions, that you can do that, and you can back own it based on a condition, etc. Yud. Now we're going to continue this concept with the idea of what's called the Shemeret Yavam. We learned the concept already, but just a quick reminder. If a husband dies with no children, the wife has an obligation to marry the husband's brother. It's called Yibum. And Yibum means in order to continue the family's name, she will marry the husband's brother. If you have children, then you don't have an obligation. Now, what happens if you don't want to marry him? You do a process called chalitza. We'll eventually learn all the halachos of the yibum and the chalitza in length and in detail later on. But in this case, the Rambam's continuing in our conversation. Shemeres Yavam, her husband dies, and her husband's brother is soon going to go marry her. She could sell, do anything she wants during this time period. And her husband's brother does not receive any of the benefit. And even the nichlis in Barzel, the kind of property we said earlier that would have gone to her original husband. So now the brother is coming over and saying, since this property went to my brother, your original husband, I should automatically fill the shoes when I marry you. The answer is no. Until you actually marry her, you don't have any rights to them, and the lady can do whatever she wants. Okay, now we get complicated. What if she dies? Which is always a complication. But she dies now when her husband had died, and she's waiting to marry her husband's brother. Is Yoshel excuse me. So her father then says, I want to inherit everything. At least the things Nichse Malug, which always remain part of her property. That was the Nichse Malug aspect. And the Chati Nichse Barzal, I even want half of the other one because I claim it as mine. On the other hand, but the inheritors of her husband, which would be her husband who passed away's family, which would be this guy she's about to marry, brothers, etc., will now come along and say, well, we inherit her ksuva, because the ksuva goes to her husband's family, and we should also want to send Barzal. So what we do is we split the property that was sort of already given over to her original husband, and and therefore, because they take some of the benefit, the husband's inheritors need to take the responsibility of burying her. So in other words, in short, the property she still retained ownership goes straight to her father. The property which she'd given over ownership to her husband, we split between her father and her husband's family. Her ksuva goes to her husband's family. Since they have benefits, they also have to have responsibility of burying her.
Rabbi,
Yes.
the same, I mean, I understand the same, but just in case, if, the husband passed away and he has a cousin who has the same last name, doesn't apply chalitza to the cousin also? To keep
No. You will learn the laws of chalitza and yibum chalitza later. It's only a brother.
Okay.
Okay. Aleph 11. Shemer's Yavam Ksuvasa Kol Nichse Baila. A Shemer Yavan, this lady who's sitting in the stays between her husband who died and her husband's brother to marry. Ksuva Kol Nichse Baila. Her ksuva is considered sort of a what's the word? A lien, if you wish, on her husband's property. So therefore, she retains some level of connection to her former husband's property, and her future husband, her brother-in-law, cannot sell it without her permission. And if he decided to sell it, to give it away as a gift, or to split it up with his family, whether before he did this yibum of marrying her or after he already married her, it doesn't count. Because she already retained a level of a lien on the property because of her ketubah. So therefore, he cannot just dispense of it without her permission and her knowledge. Yud Beis, Kanas is Yavamtai. And if she did go ahead and marry her husband's brother, and they left fruit which was attached to the ground, in other words, the produce was still attached to the tree, or the stalks of wheat were still in the ground. So what should they do? They should sell it, and they should sell all this produce, and then they should buy a new piece of property. And the person she will marry, her new husband, will be able to benefit from the produce of it. Now, the reason is because since the stuff is still attached to the ground, it sort of becomes caught between who does it belong to? The person who owned it when it was planted, or kind of the person who's going to now. So since we don't know, we sell it, and therefore buy property that they can both have benefit from going forward. Yud Gimel. But Hiniach Paris, Telushim in on the other hand, by contrast to what I just said, if the fruit was already cut off from the ground, already harvested, or if you left non-property, but non-tangible item, not tangible, non-property items, but clothing and garments, etc., movable property and money, it all goes over to the new husband. And he does what he wants. She cannot stop, because since she married him, like in a regular husband scenario, he takes over the possession for the responsibilities he has. He gets those benefits. Because metaltalin, this movable items which are not attached to the ground, are only the chachamim connected into the ksuba. And therefore the sages did not put in fact the strength of their decree to overpower his ability to take possession of his brother's property. Okay, 14. Well, one more with this Yavama, and then we're going to go back to our regular marriage. Yavama ksuva. This Yavama did not have a ksuva from her first husband, or she gave it up. She said, I waive my rights to it. He, the Yavam, the new husband, can still have the benefit of his brother's property. He can buy and sell as he wishes. And then when he does marry this lady, When he marries his new wife, his brother's former wife, he has to write her an iksuva. Doesn't even the fact that she waived the iksuva that her first one doesn't come for the second one. But therefore, she doesn't have ownership or a lien on any of the property because she did not have a ketubah. So he can do whatever he wants with his brother's property because it's his brother's property and he gets it. Now, when he marries her, he has to write her a ketubah, take on the whole responsibility, and start this whole process again. And now all of his property, which some of them may include his deceased brother's previous property, all becomes a lien on the ketubah that she has the right to then eventually take if she needs to. Okay, back to a regular lady and regular marriage situation. Tezval 15. In the Nichses Barzel, this kind of property that the lady sold or gave as a gift after she got married, whether she gave it as a gift to her husband, remember, it's her property in a sense, and she says, here, I'm giving it to you as a gift, or she does to somebody else, she has done nothing, it's of no consequence, because her husband becomes the new owner of Nichses and Barzel. This type of a property becomes his, and therefore she had no right to sell it. Doesn't matter, even if she's gifting it to him. It's not yours. And a husband who sells property that belongs to his wife, either type of these properties, he has not done anything without her permission, because she still has and retains also some ownership. So the moral of the story becomes really a joint mutual ownership that they both have to deal with each other. Then the Rambam continues. What if he sold movable objects, clothing, whatever other type of home objects of Nichses and Barzel? He's not allowed to do that. Nichses and Barzel, he's still not allowed to sell. It belongs to her. If he sold it, it's considered sold. Both of them agreed to sell from the Nichse Malug. Nichse Malug is where she retains more of the ownership of it that we said earlier, and he has the benefits. And now they both got together and said, listen, we want to get rid of this property. I don't want the benefits and you don't want the property. Whether the purchaser goes first to the man or first to the lady. When she went to, again, whether it goes to the lady first or to the man first, if they both agree, the property is sold. 17. If the lady sells or gifts her nichse malug, that's the property that she had retained a real ownership on, right? Then her gifts last. She can't say, all I'm doing is trying to make him feel good. So I wanted him to feel good, but really I did not intend to sell the property or gift him the property. I want him to feel good one day. We don't believe him. But other property, not Nichse Malug, since he already retains the right to buy and sell the produce of that property, once she gives it to him, we say, no, now you actually want him to have full control of it, and you can't just say that you're doing it just to make it feel good. Kate said, the Rambam says, what does this mean? In number 18, if a lady sells or gives her husband a gift from Nichses and Barzel, whether it's property, whether it's clothing, or the field that he wrote in the Ksuva, that this piece of field will be set aside, that if I owe you a ketuvah at any point, you'll take it from here, or it's a field that or a field of hers that was mentioned in Ksuva belonging to her, or a field that she brought in any case, like Kana Baal, the husband did not acquire it, since these fields have already preconditioned ownership that belonging to her, it doesn't go over to him. And even though the lady says, I want to sell it, here I am. I know it was set aside for my ketubah, but it doesn't matter. It goes back anytime she wants. The Rambam says we assume that she did not really intend to sell it, but she only sold it because of shalom bayis, because of peace in the home and not wanting to create any issues. Therefore, therefore, a husband cannot claim ownership and proof in his wife's property, only if she, when they both agree to sell it. In that case, it would be sold to him, would be fine. In other words, we have the concept that if somebody lives in a property for more than 3 years, they have a chazaka, and they can claim that it's theirs, and we can't take it away from them without a lot of proof. He can never do that in his wife's property of Nichsis or Barzel, because we will always say that you never really got it. She only gave it to you to make you feel good one day. But Nichsis Malug, where she retains a certain level of ownership, she has the right, the Rambam says, to actually sell it or gift it to him. You test 19. Nichse Soy Barzel. Again, it's a long chapter. We're going to keep going. I hope you can stay along. If not, God willing, I will put up the recording as well if anybody has to go. 19. Nichse Soy Barzel she'avdu nigdivhu. Nichse Soy Barzel. Again, the type of Soy Barzel properties that were stolen or lost. Another lady says, it's okay, I don't worry. I forgive you. You didn't pay attention. It lost. Whatever. It's okay. And two witnesses saw her say that, so she accepted upon herself, not just as kind of an expression, but really in front of witnesses making a statement that I've let him go. I don't have a problem. Yerali, the Rambam says, it seems to me, no longer can she say, I was just trying to make you feel, he felt bad, he lost my property. He said, don't worry, whatever happened, that happened to it, is how you just making you feel good. But if you go ahead in front of witnesses and make a clear statement, the Rambam says, that's already taking it up a level, and that's not just to make him feel good, that's a real statement. And the Rambam says, what is this compared to? That a lady, that if somebody comes along and says that you bought this property, that she forgoes the responsibility on the property, which was the Nichse Sum Barzel, and now considers it instead Nichse Meluk. So she changes the ownership of it, not the ownership, the categorization of it. And she changes it, then the Rambam says, of course she can change it. Same thing here in the sense that when she stands in front of witnesses and makes a statement, we will accept that as well. And the Rambam continues, that the husband here is not bringing proof for taking possession or maintaining a level of possession in the property, but only to remove his ability that he needs to pay. So in other words, you lost my property, and then come over to the wife and say, I lost your property. She goes, whatever, right? He's not trying to take money from her. He's trying not to have to pay. So if she goes in front of Aiden and makes a statement, then we say it's okay. That she really accepted upon herself the loss, and therefore he doesn't owe her anything more. But if she gives him, on the other hand, says, so to say, the contrast, that if she gives him movable property, clothing, books, etc., from Son Barzel, which exists, he does not acquire them, because she could always say, I want to make my husband feel good. So he said, fine, I'll gift you that book that you like. But really, I wasn't trying to gift it from him. So again, the Rambam's differentiating, because in one place, you're actually taking something from the other. And in one place, you're only not having to pay something to the other. And the Rambam uses that as a differentiation for why in one case it is accepted, in one case it's not accepted. 20. Chaf. Bal Shabachar Karkar Lepeiros. If a husband sells a karkar, sells a property, in order Lepeiros for the produce. Lo Yasa Klumi has not done anything with Lo Shehis Kidu Peiros Leish Al Yelavich B'Tzaras Habayis. Because we only allow the husband to have the benefit of fruit, and here's the punchline that we've been saying all along: in order to have more money for the expenditures of the house. So therefore, he were giving him a property and say, go work this property. And the money you bring in from this property, you'll pay for the heating and the electric and the whatever other expenses of the house. So what does he do? He goes down the block to his friend and says, I will sell you the rights to any produce on this property. So now what is he left with? Nothing for the house. So the Rambam says, that's not okay. The only reason we gave you that benefit was because of your responsibility and because you had to take care of the house. You can't just go get rid of it. Therefore, the Rambam continues, on the other hand, if he says, right now this property is not doing so well, so what do I want to do? I'm going to sell the produce, which you told me I can't sell because I need to take care of the house. But now I'm going to do a business deal. I'm going to sell the produce to somebody down the block, take that money, and now I'm going to go do more business, so I'll have more money to take care of the household expenses. That would be okay, because again, the rationale behind this is you're allowed to benefit in order to help the household and your responsibility. So if you're doing a normal business and that's helping get out, that's fine. If you're doing it just to make money randomly to put in, kind of say, in your pocket, that's not allowed. And it doesn't bring in continued income to help you with your responsibility. Chaf Aleph, 21. If the lady had cash or had financial resources, in Nichlis and Barzel, if the Nichlis and Barzel, that's the stuff that we give over to the husband, he could go do whatever he wants and sell and buy and do business with it, invest it, etc. If Nichlis Maluke ben Shichnisa Isolai ben Shanaf Labirusha, I need Matanam, I know Matatlan Nidula, Hareli Machri Lakbar Karkar. But so in other words, the Rambam says the difference. If it's Nichse, Saint Barzel, that's the one that we give over to the husband, so we let him give over and go do what he wants business. But if it's Nichse Maluk that she still retains an ownership, whether she brought it in earlier, whether she had it as inheritance, whether she got it as a gift, Rambam says, or somebody gave it to her, it doesn't matter. He could sell it and buy a property in order to have the benefits of the produce to help the household needs. But he can't just do random business. He has to focus on being able to bring in continued support for the home. And if a lady was injured, she's walking on the street, she's injured by someone. And we know the halacha is if you injured someone, you need to pay them different categories of money. You need to pay for their medical bills, you need to pay for lost wages, you need to pay for something called if you shame them, if it was embarrassment. Again, these halachas we'll learn much later on in the laws of damages. But nonetheless, she is now given over a large sum of money as all this money that she's given, what should she do? She should buy a property. And the husband will then be able to eat and benefit from the produce of this field, while she will still retain the ownership of the actual field. As we will explain in the laws of chayva, that's the laws of damages, which again we're going to get to later on, where it talks more about this. Chav Gimel, 23. Naflu avadim, if she had slaves or servants, even if they are old, he should not sell these slaves and servants that she brings in from her father's house, even if they're older slaves and servants, because they bring honor to their father's house. That was so-and-so's tailor, and that was so-and-so the baker or butcher, whatever. So if you just sell them, if the husband says, I don't care, there's no connection, we say no. There's a certain level of she needs this connection to her parents' home, and it represents shvach, kind of a praise to the parents. Brings honor to them, if you wish. This is the halacha if she has zeisim v'gefanim, or olive trees or vine for grapevines. She did not inherit the land that they're on, but she inherited the trees. If they're producing enough to keep for their upkeep, basically, that's fine. Because everyone knows this is so-and-so's orchard, or this is so-and-so's vineyard. So he can't just sell it. But if they're not out keeping up their upkeep, then what are you going to do? You're losing money. And then you should sell them as firewood, basically, because they have no other benefit to you. But the Rambam says still, the best to do, sell them these trees, because they're old trees, they're not accomplishing. Go ahead and buy with these trees firewood, and then go ahead and buy a new piece of property and eat the produce and benefit from the produce. She inherits peiros, produce, which is still, as we said before, attached to the ground or to the trees. Belong to the husband. In this whole conversation we're talking about, if they've been uprooted, if they're cut and harvested, they belong to her. And then again, the Rambam suggests you sell them, buy more property in order that you should both be able to benefit from the produce going forward. But if a husband divorces his wife, and there was still fruit, produce attached to the ground during the time of the divorce, they belong to her. It's kind of the reverse, but then if they were cut, then it goes to him. So in other words, he can take the benefit by the divorce of what is separate from the ground, but he can't take what belongs to the ground because that goes back to her since she retained ownership the entire time. 25. Slaves that are nichsim alug, or behemoths nichsim alug, or animals that belong to this nichsim alug, which means that the Baal Chayim, the husband, since he has to take care of this property because it belongs to her, and all he can get is the produce, so he'll say, I don't really care about this animal. I don't want to feed it anymore. The answer is no. You are responsible to feed it. Whatever they bring in, he's entitled to keep. Or if it's a fruit, he's welcome to the produce. If the maid gives birth to a child, or the animal gives birth to a calf, it belongs to the husband, because that's the produce, the fruit of these items, so to say, are the children, the offspring. If they get divorced, the lady says, you know what? We're getting divorced. Technically, the child of the maid belongs to you, my husband, and before we got divorced. Now that we're getting divorced, I want her. I want the child of the maid, him or her, the child of the maid. We listen to her because in honor of her parents. Again, this was her parents' baker, butcher, maid, etc. It's connected to her parents' house, and therefore we allow her to say, I will take care to buy from you and acquire this child, even though technically that belonged to the husband, but we force the husband to give it to her so she can retain her parents' honor. 26. Chavav. If she brought in two servants, the Rambam writes, or two utensils, and they were evaluated that the value of them was 1,000 zuz. This is a type of currency. Let's say $1,000. And then they went up in value. In other words, 2,000 for Gershon. She got divorced. So she takes one of the 1,000. That means one of the utensils or one of the maidservants. And the second one, she can't automatically assume ownership because she brought in 1,000. She's supposed to take 1,000 back. But here she could say that I want that extra maid again because of the honor of my parents' house. And we listen to her. If a person gives a gift to his wife, whether he gives his wife karka, ground, land, or property, or he gives her money, she took that money and bought property. So now the husband doesn't have the produce of this gift. He gave it to her as a gift in order that she should have extra. Someone gives a gift to the lady. I go over to the lady and say, I'm going to give you a gift on condition that your husband's not allowed to have the benefit here. But you will be able to do whatever you want with this extra money that you receive from the benefit from the fruit. Then the husband's not allowed to have for the benefit because it was given deliberately or conditioned, then he doesn't get any. Someone sells the rights to her ksuva. There's a concept. I guess you have this sort of with mortgages and other deeds that a lady could say to someone, "Here, I need money. I mean, I can deal with you. My ksuva is worth $1,000, let's say. If I, so to say, get divorced, right? So I'm going to sell it to you for 500. You're taking a risk. If I get divorced, you get 1,000. If I don't, you'll lose 500." And she comes along, and someone comes along and says, "I'll take care of that risk." I guess he knew something about their marriage. I don't know. And take it of that risk. So then that money belongs to her, and the husband has no connection to it because that money of the ksuva always belonged to her, and she's doing this deal in order to get her own money. He can't come and take it. Chavches 28. Vlad behemoth bilu shenignav. If the child, if a calf of an animal from Nichsim Elug was stolen, and they caught the ganef, and the halacha is that the ganef, the thief, when he's apprehended, has to pay twice the amount. Shnayim Yishalim, we learned the Pashas Mishpatim that the punishment is he has to pay double. The double goes back to the lady. This is not the benefit of Chachamim that made the decree. The teachers were never intending. The decree was for a thief and the extra money. They were intending normal usage of the field and the produce. So therefore, this money was never part of that decree, and it goes to the lady. And the same thing we said again is if, but a chayvel is an injury. If a man injures his wife, it's called a nezik v'asar v'aboisha shalah. The nezik is the damages that he has to pay her for. Tsar is the pain that he put her through. Boishes is the embarrassment. These items, there's other items you have to pay as well. Lost wages, you go to the person who lost the wages, could have been her employer, and refuah would go to the doctor. But these 3 out of the 5 items go to the person who was injured. They go to her. He can't say, "Well, I injured you, I'll pay you, but I'm taking the money back." It doesn't work that way. Stay tuned. In the laws of damages, we'll explain this more in detail, but the Rambam says he does not receive any rights to this money that he had to pay his wife if he injured her. Chavtes 29. Someone sold karka to his wife. So a husband comes and says, "I have a piece of property, I want to sell it to you." So if the money was sitting in the bank from before they got married, and the husband knew she had this money, then she buys it. Then it becomes hers. She acquired it. And the husband can continue to eat the benefits, the produce of that field. But if these funds were hidden, which means that the husband never knew she had a drawer or a box under her mattress is $1,000. Like Kansa, she cannot acquire the land. The husband would say, I only created this whole fictitious sale to have you bring out all the money you were hiding from me. But I really don't want to sell it to you. And therefore, I wanted to continue the way it was before, and I will eat the benefit. So if the money was open, he can't argue. Everybody knows she had that money. But if the money was hidden, he could have been doing this in a sense as a ploy to get out the money. But this money now that kind of was revealed during this ploy, the Rambam says you should buy more property of which she will retain ownership of the property because it was her money, but he will be able to have the benefit of the produce. 30, Lamed. If the lady suddenly shows up and has money or something in her clothing or book in her hand, here marries b'matana niduli. She says he gave it to me as a gift, right? Well, not he, not the husband. Someone gave it to me as a gift. And really know that your money that belongs to me. One of the conversations that we spoke about earlier, which she doesn't really get touched on too much, but it's kind of in the background of this whole conversation here, is that when she works, technically she's supposed to give her money over to her husband, and with that money, he's supposed to feed her, clothe her, and take care of her. Now, what if she says, I don't want to do that? That we learned in other chapters and we'll continue to learn in those kind of discussions. But if she comes along in this scenario and says, I got this as a gift. And he says, no, you got it by working. It really is supposed to go into the communal plot, family ownership, if you wish. She is believed. And she can make and the husband says, I want to make, like we learned earlier, a shvua, kind of an excommunication, a statement in Bezdin, and whoever says something that's not true. Because we don't know if it's true, but we'll believe it. She says, if somebody did something wrong to me, I'm making a public statement that you should know that bad things will befall them if they're not telling the truth. And if she doesn't change her mind, I mean, she's comfortable that she's telling the truth, we move on. But the Rambam still suggests that you should buy produce, you should buy ground and share the produce. V'im Amram and asking to leave, she says, well, no, these funds, this money was given to me with amenashali in order that my husband should not have any benefit. Like we said before, if I give a gift to a lady and say, in order your husband should not have any benefit, he does not have any benefit. So she says that this money you're asking me where did it come from? It came from someone down the block who gave me a gift and said, I want to give you a gift on condition your husband has no part of it. She now needs to bring proof to her statement, to her claim. Because any money which is found by the wife, any property, any money, any items are technically set up in such a way that the husband should be able to have the benefit of it. And now you want to change that, so she has to bring the proof to it. So when earlier she said, it was a gift given to me is one thing. When she says it was given to me on the condition you don't get any, that's a different story. And she has to bring proof to her claim. Lamed Aleph, 31. If she says you gave it to me as a gift, not somebody gave it to me as a gift and said, don't let your husband, but you, my husband, gave it to me as a gift, which means he does not have the ability to take the produce because he gave it as the gift. Sorry. Then she takes a shvua, which is a rabbinic oath that says that I got it from my husband, and then he does not have the produce or benefit from it. All right, we're turning the last corner, one page left. Lamed Beis. You're not allowed to receive an article to keep. Somebody comes over to you and says, can you hold on to this item for me? This is a very valuable book. It is $100. Please hold on to it for me. So the Rambam says, we don't accept such items for safekeeping from a lady, from a servant, or from a katan, a child. But if you did accept it from the lady, give it back to the lady. He said, listen, I don't want to get involved in this. Here it is, it's back to you. Because technically speaking, maybe it really belongs to the husband to have benefit. And she's trying to cut her husband out of the scene. Or an Eved is trying to cut his master, the slave's trying to cut his master out of the scene. Or a child never had proper ability to acquire anything to begin with. So he takes something from his parents, and he doesn't have a right to have it either. So what do we do if it's the lady? Give it back to the lady. Mesa Yachsel Labailo, she dies, you give it back to the husband because he would have inherited her. Kibble, if you received it from the slave, Yachsel Eved, give it back to the slave and say, go back to whatever situation you had before this. And if he dies, the slave dying, then return it to the master. Kibble, and if you received it from a child, buy a Sefer Torah, or something that will have long-lasting benefit, and then wait till the child grows up and figure out what the story and who has to go back to. But don't just give it back to the child. And all of them, as they were about to pass away, said, by the way, this article I gave you for safekeeping really belongs to that guy down the block. If they were believed that they interacted with that person in such a way that they could have been safekeeping his articles, his items, then do what they say. If you love, if not, give it to their inheritors. So maybe they're cutting out their inheritors now from receiving this book by making up it belongs to someone else. But if they would be the kind of people to interact with that person that he would trust them for safekeeping, then we trust what they say. If not, they just maybe make that up, and therefore we can't remove it from the property of their inheritors or the Evid's inheritors without proof. Lamed Gimel 33. A lady who had money, which was sufficient to buy property, which the husband would be able to eat the produce, the benefits of. But they have an argument about how much they should buy. So he says you should buy this and this. And she says only this amount of this type. Here's some business advice. The Rambam says buy something that the produce, the benefits are much, and the outcome and the upkeep is little. So buy something that's going to have less on the upkeep side and more on the output side. No, whether that's what he wants or she wants. Don't look at the argument, look at what's best. And we only buy something that will renew itself, something that will have the ability to be like an annual and continue to give produce and give fruit and give benefits. Otherwise, because otherwise they'll use up the entire property or the entire item and then it'll be gone. So we don't want you to do that. We want you to invest in something that will continue to make money and bring money into your home, into your situation. So therefore, the Rambam says there was a high output but low upkeep, and also something that won't be destroyed at once, but will continue to make produce and make benefit. 34. A lady brought into the marriage a goat that gives milk, or a sheep for its wool. V'dekel leperesav, or a tree, a date tree, who gives fruit. Even though she is entitled, even though she says I can only have these benefits from this milk or from the wool, from the dates, she can eat and do whatever she wants. Her husband is able to use these benefits. In other words, she says only use the benefits of the items, but don't destroy the item. But the Rambam says no, he can go ahead and do whatever he wants, even if it destroys. So if you overtake the prune tree and it dies, etc. The same thing if he brought in a shirt. So she says, don't wear the shirt, because if you wear the shirt, it's going to get ruined. If it gets ruined, it'll be destroyed. No, he is allowed to have the benefits, so he can wear the shirt. Even though after a number of times of wearing the shirt, it will get ruined, he's still allowed to do it. And then if they end up getting divorced, he is not required to pay for what blias is the worn out, the garment becomes worn out over time, the depreciation of the garment or of the item because of his nichse malug, and that's the responsibility that he accepted, and that's what the halacha tells him. Lamed Hey 35. The Gaonim issued another decree, another ruling, that that we said that nichse barzel, different than nichse malug, it is the depreciation is the responsibility of the husband. So nichse malug, we're not looking at. That was what appreciate, depreciate. That's it. Get whatever it is. Nichse and barzel, you're supposed to return the same thing. So barzel, she gets a shirt in nichse and barzel, and now he's going to wear it, and then they get divorced. So she says, I give you a shirt without a hole in the elbow. Now you can be back and use the shirt. I don't want it. He says, no. The Gaonim said that if the item still exists and it's still capable of being used for its initial usage, like a shirt to be worn, they tell us she takes them for what they are and she goes and walks away. But if the shirt is not wearable at all, there's no sleeves, there's no buttons, it's completely torn and worn out, then it's like they were stolen or lost. In other words, they don't exist anymore. Then he has to pay the value that he accepted, that was appraised at the original time. So Nichlis and Barzel, they stay strong. Barzel, because he has to pay back the value that we evaluated on this item at the beginning of marriage. But here the Gaonim goes a step further and saying, if the item can still retain its previous usage, even though it's worn out, he could just put it on the table and walk away. If it cannot be used for its previous usage, then he has to pay the difference in the value. Well, meaning Pashin, who said, the Rambam continues, this is a simple custom, it's an accepted ruling. Whoever gets married, this is what he accepted his responsibility when he got married, to say that if the shirt is still here, even though it's a little bit worn, I can leave, put the shirt down and walk away. But Aram says, just like you say, you don't want to have to be responsible for the depreciation, you can't accept the appreciation. You can't say, well, today the shirt is a collector's item, now it's worth $100 more, so you owe me $100. That's not the case. The item is here, you put the item down and you walk away. According to this custom, even if the value goes up and appreciates, that's the case. Yesh Labaldaram continues, Lokov mixes up the Ishta and myself, she Mishamshal Beves Isha Shanasa. That the Rambam says that if she has a lot of maidservants, he's married to 2 women. So he says, I want to take some of your maidservants, because you don't need them all in your house, and make them work for my other wife. He's allowed to do that. Ben Shayav de Maluk, Ben Shayav de Ser Barzel. Whether there's this Nichsis Maluk aspect, the Nichsis Ser Barzel, responsible, not responsible, however that all plays out here. But he can't make them go to another city. In other words, if his second wife lives in the same city, he can make them go there because they're still around, they're still considered part of the household. If she lives in a second city, then he can't send them there because that's a whole new concept. And with this, we concluded Perek Chaf Beis, chapter 22.
Thank you, Rabbi.